The next function we are going to be discussing is called mail. So in the search, we are going to type mail. There we go. And what this specific function does, it simply sends email. It returns Boolean true or false. It takes several arguments. The first one is a string, and it's represented by this variable 2. Then we have another string subject, string message, and then we have two optional, as you can see, the square brackets, arguments, additional headers and additional parameters. We are going to leave the additional parameters off because it's a bit more advanced topic, but we will discuss these first four. So if we scroll down, parameters to receiver or receivers of the email, of the mail. The formatting of the string must comply with RFC 2822. Some examples are here. You can obviously open this in a new tab and have a read as well. But basically what it means is it needs to obviously comply with the email format. So it's either email, if it's more than one recipient, then obviously you can separate them by comma. You can also put name of the recipient and then in angle brackets, in between the angle brackets basically, put email address. Again, you can use multiple ones, so separate them by comma like this. Then we have a subject and subject of the email to be sent. That's exactly what it is. And again, in this, the subject must satisfy this specific format. Again, you can open this and read a little bit more about this format. Then we have a message, which is basically the message that we're trying to send, and each line should be separated by these two characters basically, which is a new line obviously, to make sure that it's obviously compatible with all mail clients. So when you read, so that you actually get a new line. And then lines should not be larger than 70 characters. And then we have a caution, Windows only. When PHP is talking to the to a SMTP server directly, if a full stop is found on the start of the line, it is removed. To counteract this, replace these occurrences with a double dot. So basically we're using string replace function. We place in the new line character with the full stop. So after the new line, if there's a full stop, replace it with a new line and two stops. So basically just the first full stop is going to be removed, and then the first one, the next one is going to be left off. Left in place, obviously. And then we have additional headers, which is, as you can see, optional. This is the first one in between the brackets, the square brackets, and that is the string to be inserted at the end of the email header. This is typically used to add extra headers like from, CC, and BCC. Extra headers, multiple extra headers should be separated with, again, same end of line character. If outside data are used to compose this header, the data should be sanitized so that no unwanted headers could be injected. What that means, obviously, if you are passing any data that to the headers basically that has been submitted by a user on the website, let's say using a form, make sure that you obviously sanitize in a way so that the format is correct. Make sure that you validate this data before you pass it on to this additional headers argument. And then we have a note: additional headers does not have mail header injection protection, which is basically referring to this sanitization here. So therefore, users must make sure specified headers are safe and contains headers only. Never start mail body by putting multiple new lines. So that's another thing. Then we have another note: when sending mail, the mail must contain a from header. So this is one of the required ones. We have to add it, and we will in just a moment when we start actually working with this function. This can be set with the additional headers parameter, which we are going to be using, or a default can be set in PHP ini. We're not going to be playing with this PHP ini at all, so we are going to be using this additional headers argument. Then we have failing to do this will result in an error message similar to warning mail, send mail from, not set in PHP ini, or custom from header missing. So basically this is what we're going to get if we forget to add this from header. Then we have another note: if messages are not received, try using a LF, which is basically this only new line, basically character only. Some Unix mail transfer agents, most notably Gmail, replace LF, which is basically this \n character, obviously invisible to us in the editor, by CRLF, which is basically this \r and then followed by \n, which leads to doubling CR if CRLF is used. This should be a last resort, as it does not comply with this specific format. So we're not going to be worried about this because it's going to work just fine, as you will see in just a moment. Additional parameters, we can ignore this one because, as you can see, the additional parameters can be used to pass additional flags as command line options, and we're not playing with command line here, so we can ignore this one. Obviously, later on, when you're gonna start playing with this at a little bit more advanced level, when you start using command line, chances are you're not going to be using mail function, but if you do, then you can obviously have a look at this additional parameter as well. And if we scroll down, we've got quite a few. Obviously, first of all, return values. It returns true if the mail was successfully accepted for delivery, false otherwise. But it is important to note that just because the mail was accepted for delivery, it does not mean that that mail will actually reach the intended destination. There are obviously spam filters. Different mail servers may obviously reject the email for many different reasons, and so on. Mail will be sent if it returns true. That means that it has been sent. But obviously, if it's going to, whether it's going to be received or not, it's entirely down to the mail server, the recipient's mail server. And then we have obviously this changelog, which is additional parameters. The last one, again, we don't have to worry about this for now. And there are a few examples. If we scroll down, there are a few more notes. One of them says, if intending to send HTML or otherwise complex mails, it is recommended to use a per package per mail MIME, which is basically object-oriented approach. We are not going to be looking at this. We're only going to focus on this mail function. The Windows implementation of mail differs in many ways from the Unix implementation. And now I'm using macOS 10 here, which is based on Unix. If you're working on Windows, this is pretty important. First, it doesn't use a local binary for processing messages, but only operates on direct sockets, which means a MTA is needed listening on a network socket, which can either on the local host or remote machine. What that basically means is that Unix uses different approach to sending email as opposed to Windows. And on Windows, you may find it quite difficult to actually send email directly from your machine using mail function. But don't worry about this. When we're going to publish the project to the server, web server, which will be Linux, then everything should work just fine. Then we have second and custom headers like from, CC, BCC, and date are not interpreted by this MTA in the first place, but are parsed by PHP. As such, the two parameters should not be addressed in the form of something, and then obviously this angle brackets and the email address. The mail command may not parse this properly while talking with the MTA. So if you're on Windows, you're probably only going to be using the email approach rather than this one with say name and angle brackets and email in between them. And then we have a note. It is worth noting that the mail function is not suitable for larger volumes of email in a loop. We are going to be discussing loops shortly as well. Basically what that means, if we are looping through, let's say, an array of a collection of emails to which we want to send specific email, mail is not the best way to basically distribute them this way. This function opens and closes an SMTP socket for each email, which is not very efficient. And this is basically the reason why. Okay, so let's go to our editor and start actually working with this function.